Welcome to Agency Acquisitions and Exits. I'm your host, Peter Lang. Today, we welcome Megan Bowen of Refine Labs. Does Refine Labs sound familiar? It should. Previous episode with Mark Homer talked about his acquisition, his partnership with Megan in the partner buyout of Refine Labs. Megan shares all of the very specific inner workings, the partner conflicts that led to her ability as a minority owner to buy out her majority business partner. It's a very vulnerable and transparent journey that is so relatable to any of us who've ever had business partners or are actively with a business partner today. You're going to hear how she was able to survive ups and downs and ultimately get to the point where she was able to buy the business from the original founder. It has so much that you need to listen to, you need to internalize, and could potentially, if you're in a partnership, transform your entire thinking about what's available to you. Let's dive in.
Jump in.
Megan, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited about this.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
For those who have heard Mark's story, and I've had Mark on the podcast a few times, the listeners may know about Refine Labs. And by the way, Megan, I go into the marketplace and I talk about Refine Labs occasionally, and people go, I know that agency. They know who you are. They know Megan. They follow you on LinkedIn. But for those who happen to not know who Refine Labs is and who Megan is, can you get them a quick up to speed background?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Megan Bowen. I'm the CEO and owner of Refine Labs, which is a B2B marketing agency. I spent the bulk of my career actually working inside B2B SaaS companies. First 15 years of my career, kind of climbing the corporate ladder, started in sales and account management, got into operations, eventually got into leadership as a chief operating officer. After I had a bit of an exit, our software company managed by Q was acquired by WeWork. I was then figuring out, should I go into consulting? What should I do? The founder of Refine Labs approaches me and basically over the course of about 4 months was very persistent and convinced me to join him as his COO to scale Refine Labs. At the time, there was, a handful of employees, a handful of customers, and it was essentially that really Chris's consulting business. So there really wasn't too much there yet. And that was in the summer of 2020. And I have been running and building Refine Labs ever since.
So it gets to a certain point, you become a partner in Refine Labs. He didn't just convince you to join and work for him. You became a partner and really drove the next version of the agency.
Yeah, and
explain a little bit of that.
Yeah, just to interject there, because initially he had this him and I had done a little bit of content production together and we knew each other on LinkedIn, but we didn't have any experience working together. So we were acquaintances, professional friends. And initially he said, let's go all in. Let's form a business partnership. If you want, you can buy into the agency. And, I had worked at a lot of different companies. I was a little bit older than him. And I was like, look, I'm willing to give this a shot, but we don't really know each other that well yet. And so I said, let's work together for 6 months. Let's see how it goes. Let's see if there's really something here that we can turn into a real business. When I first joined, it was, it had all the right ingredients, but wasn't really like a fully operational business yet. And we'll revisit this conversation after 6 months. And so we started working together. He was like, okay, that sounds good. That makes sense. So it wasn't until 6 months into working together that we actually decided that we would formally create a business partnership. And I actually bought in for a percentage of the agency as the owner at that time. And it was a whirlwind of a 6 months. Everything seemed to be going great. Everything was moving in our favor in terms of the market and the brand and my ability to operationalize like all the raw ingredients that were there. So, we had all these great times and we're like, all right, let's do this. Let's make it happen. And so it was March of 2021 that then we finally, I became a co-owner and we had, like a kind of a formal business partnership. So that was the evolution from the beginning, early days.
Oh, he was so lucky to get you. And spoiler for the listeners, it was a very good return on investment for you, and it's continuing to be. So we'll get to that. Okay, so fast forward a bit. It's 2022. It's 23. How's the business evolving, and how's your role changing, and how does Chris transitioning slowly more out of the business? Because that's part of your narrative that we're going to get into here.
Yeah. I feel like we had this like I would always joke with Chris. I was like, they're gonna write like a Harvard Business Review like case study on Refine Labs one day. We had this like hero's journey arc. So I joined in 2020. I think we had maybe $1 million in revenue in 2020. We were kind of just getting started, but as I joined and him and I started working together, we realized after the COVID kind of fear and all of the initial layoffs and panic that was happening, we realized, oh my gosh, we are running a digital marketing agency, and today the only thing that people can spend on is digital marketing because the whole world is just online. And so there was also this insane VC activity happening at the time. And so we were selling to VC backed startups and they just wanted to spend and spend and spend money on paid advertising. So we were just seeing all of these things coming together. And starting in 2021, we just had this like epic growth phase from like late 2020 to really like the end of 2021. I mean, we grew like 7x that year. The following year, it just kept compounding. And it was like we could do no wrong, right? Like we just thought we were the smartest entrepreneurs that ever existed. We were like, we're riding this wave. We like kept raising our prices. Like when I first joined Chris, our retainers were like 8K a month. I think at the height of it, we were charging like 50K a month for every customer to come in. It was ridiculous. I mean, we were just like riding high, right? And when times were good, our business partnership was fantastic. It was great. 2022 is when we have this like SaaS apocalypse, right? Like VC funding dries up, companies are running out of money, budgets are tightening, no one's making a lot of investments, and that directly impacted our customer base, right? So we start to feel the second order impacts of that. Massive churn,
Honeymoon's over.
honeymoon is over, churn, acquisition becomes, whereas, 90 days prior, we had like a wait list of people that would wait 90 days to sign up with us. It was impossible to get a new client, right? So we went from this like boom time, amazing like growth story to, oh my God, everything is falling apart around us. What are we going to do? And so 2022, really starting in like the middle of the year, May, June, is when things started to kind of fall apart. We had to do some layoffs in the back half of 22, and then we had to just kind of like regain our footing. And in 2022 was when things really started to shift in the business and with me and Chris. It was his first time probably going through a significant like downturn event, and we had to make a ton of difficult decisions, right? And like I'd had to manage through layoffs before and different downturns. And so I sort of just ended up taking a more active role because I just had more experience navigating these types of things,
Yeah.
right? Moving into 2023, we were then trying to really figure out, okay, how do we restabilize? We still had a good business, right? It was just not in this like rocket ship crazy growth as an agency business. And so
Yeah.
that period of time was when um, I think I started really running the agency and trying to figure out how we were going to navigate like all those turbulent waters. That was really like the shift when things shit started hitting the fan. I had to be the one going in there and
Yeah.
cleaning it up.
And that's the critical time when business partnerships get tested
Hmm.
is when there's a downturn, when you have to do layoffs, who's going to step up and take on the responsibility of turning around the ship, getting everybody cheerleading in the right direction again. And from an entrepreneurial journey perspective, that's a lot really quickly for you to go into from kind of your corporate background, all this big responsibility you had in these large organizations to not like a really small team where you have like really deep emotional ties and the momentum and the celebrations are even more impactful. And off of the back of such tremendous tailwind of growth, the pendulum swings hard the other way. That sets the stage for kind of the partner dynamic. And for the listener who's got business partner experience, maybe feels the same way, speak to that a little bit and what kind of decisions besides just the business, like the things that had to get done, were you starting to consider about the partnership?
Yeah, and so I think um, it in 2022 and 2023 is where as we were navigating this as a business, there were major decisions that were coming up And I think where up until that point, all of the major decisions when Chris and I were working on them together, we were very aligned, right? Like, yes, let's do this, let's go in this direction, let's go in this direction. The other thing that happened in our dynamic was I was technically a 10% owner, and in our operating agreement, I did not have like equal control or decision rights. But the way Chris had proposed the partnership, like how it should operate, he was like, "Look, on paper, I am the final decision maker, but we're really in this 50-50." This was kind of how he presented it to me, and for a long time, it was how we operated, right? Like, we really made sure we were in agreement on all of the big decisions, and so I knew it wasn't in writing, but he said it, and then he was following through
Yeah.
on a series of decisions. In 2022, we started disagreeing. So we ended up hiring like 40 people in 90 days in the first quarter of 2022. And I started seeing some of the signs that are like that the honeymoon was about to end in terms of the market dynamics, and I was strongly recommending that we, like, hit the brakes, right, on all of the hiring. I'm like, "Let's hire 20 people, not 40 people," right? Like, I'm like, "We could still hire a bunch of people, but, like, we should start hedging our bets a little bit," like, the tide seemed to be turning. And this was, like, the first time that he had ridden such a wave. He had not been through a recession, and he was just adamant that we had to capture the moment and grow, right? And I knew that we were gonna overhire, and we basically had our first disagreement where he was basically like, "Well, it's my decision." Like, "What about the 50-50?" He's like, "Well, you don't agree, but I can technically override you, and I'm gonna use that power," right? And it was like, "Oh, no." And it was like he is within his rights to do so, right? It was in paper, but
Yeah.
that wasn't what our mutual understanding was.
Yeah.
And so that was the beginning of some fracture there. The same thing happened a couple months later. We decided to take out some debt. I knew we needed some for working capital, but I didn't want to take out the full amount. That was another big decision that we
It's
disagreed
huge.
on, that he
Yeah.
vetoed, right? And this is what we're doing. We then had to do layoffs, and I was like, I told you not to hire all these people. We just hired all these people. Now we have to fire all these people. Like, we're giving them severance. And we ended up paying out, we did 2 layoffs in the back half of 2022, and we paid out almost $1 million in severance because of how many people we had to lay off, and I insisted on a 6-week package for everyone, which I know is generous, and him and I were disagreed a lot on that. I was eventually able to get him on my side in terms of, like, taking care of these people that we all just hired and basically had to get rid of. And then continuing to move forward, he decided he wanted to take the agency, he wanted to, like, completely reposition the agency. He wanted to move away from selling demand gen and paid advertising and go into like a totally different business. And I was like, "Wait a second, what? Like, we built a whole agency that does this, and you want to do this? How is this going to work?" So it was just these critical business decisions, one after the other,
Yeah.
and that was really the root cause of our partnership beginning to start to break down and disintegrate. And then I think emotions are high during these times too, right? So it was
Yeah.
like
Stress
very,
levels are high. Emotions are
yeah.
high. Yeah.
And, like, it's really easy for both of us to blame each other for things, whether it was legitimate or not legitimate. I was then building resentment because I was like, "We had this 50-50 deal, and now you're just vetoing, like, all of the good decisions and making poor decisions from my perspective." I was like, "What's happening?" I was really frustrated, and then
Wheels
I
are
also
falling off.
the wheel and then I'm also like, I am, I always we used to joke about it where I was the wartime CEO, he was the peacetime CEO. So, like, I'm doing all of the shitty work
Yeah.
and not really feeling like I'm able to make important decisions. So it was bubbling up over 2022 and 2023.
Yeah.
All of these things were happening, and it was a very difficult and, like, tense period in our business partnership.
Yeah. Um, we met in February of 25. I think that's
Yes.
accurate.
Yes.
So before our introduction, you had entertained a variety of different approaches to resolve that tension.
Yes, we tried a lot of things.
Is
We
this
brought in
therapy? No.
Yeah, we, like, brought
All of
in
it.
an outside
Yeah.
consultant to help us think about, like, how we structured our leadership team and decision making and reporting structure. In 2023, I actually said, like, I don't know if we can operate this closely within the
Yeah.
business anymore. He said, "You know what? I think you're right. You be the CEO. I have this new idea. I'll start a new company." So, January of 24, you're the CEO, you run this business. I'm going to start this other business. We had also negotiated some new guardrails for decision making and got that in writing. So I was like, okay, maybe this can work, right? Like if he's over here and I'm
If he
over
leaves,
here,
maybe it can work.
maybe it can work. Like let's try this, right? And so we that was I became the CEO January of 2024. We announced it. He starts a new company, and actually for a while things were okay. It was kind of working out. I could kind of focus on what I was doing. We would touch base, a couple times a month. As we were moving through the year, though, um, the same pattern from before came up again. So when a couple of big decisions needed to be made in 2024, he again wanted to play the majority owner card, right? Well, I know you're the CEO and I know that we said we were going to take decision making this way, but we're not going to do what you want to do. We're going to do what I want
Yeah.
to do. And to be fair, there were a lot of things he did give me control over, right? So it was better than it was before. There were a lot of decisions that he didn't necessarily agree with, but said, okay, like I'll trust you, do your thing. So it wasn't completely one sided, but it just kept happening again and again and again. We had also discussed that eventually our goal was to sell the agency in Q4 of 24. Someone reaches out to me and says they want to acquire Refine Labs. And I was like, hey, maybe this is the out. Maybe we should do this. So we go through a process with the potential acquirer and they give us a term sheet. But as soon as I saw the term sheet, I was like, I knew Chris was not going to go for it. I believe that they undervalued us a bit and the offer wasn't great, but I was getting to the point where I was almost ready
Yeah.
to figure out an exit strategy for myself. And I said, maybe this is a clean way to move forward. As expected, he did not want to proceed. So obviously he needed to be on board to sell the company. So that killed that particular option. And once again, we're having all these conversations. And, I actually remember talking to him on February 5th of 2025. I was in an airport and he was like in a really good mood. And he was like, I'm feeling really energized about our partnership in the future. And I'm really excited about the plan you put forth. And I'm really going to like let you do your thing. You know what you're doing. And here's what I'm going to be working on. And he was like, "Oh, let's like make plans to like get together and just like spend some quality time together." He was like really putting in this effort to like let's make this work. Let's try again. And I was just like,
Yeah.
"All right, we could try again." And then 5 days later he called me and said, he called me from a taxi in Australia and said, "I had an epiphany. You need to buy me out." And I was like, "What?" And so it was within 5 days, it went
Yeah.
from like, "Let's do this" to "buy me out." And that brought us to February 20 through a really fun series of introductions and connections. You and I ended up on a Zoom.
Yeah. You were energetic about the options before you. And the thing that teed up our introduction was, partner buyout and M&A. And there was an opportunity for you to obviously buy the business from Chris. And you had some previous interests and some people who had valued the business in certain ways that I didn't agree with either. So it wasn't that Chris was not in a good position to accept those offers. They weren't the best offers available to you.
Yeah.
But in that heightened sensitivity of like, is this even going to exist as a business if I'm not around? Do I even want to put time and energy into it? At the end of the day, you're trying to do right by the clients, right by, the investment that you put into the company and the people who work there, and sometimes selling it to someone who will care for it more deeply and more than your partnership is allowing you to do is a good prudent option for a company. But that wasn't the recommendation I gave you. My obvious one was like, "Ooh, this is a great investment. Let's figure out how to do this." And I end up introducing you to a gentleman. All roads were kind of pointed, and I also introduced you to a few others to give you perspective, that said you should buy this. So
Yeah,
maybe
and
let's talk about that mental shift where you're like, you were going from, I'm going to potentially just leave this thing, to yes, I am going to buy it from you out of spite. No, out of out of intention for doing what's right for the team and the clients.
you actually were a pivotal conversation in this journey for me because I was just honestly, I was angry, I was frustrated, I was like exhausted, I was confused. I was like, it was such a whip flash from me, like trying to, I was like, okay, I'm going to give this one more chance with Chris. And then after he, like, basically like, let's say no to this offer. And like, you and me, he was like talking at me like this for 2 months. And then he's just like, I want out, get me, buy me out, figure out. And by the way, figure out a way to buy me out. And this is my price, not I'm going to do any work for you. Like, you figure this out and let me know how much how much you're going to give me. So I was just like, I had like felt like I hit the end of my rope, right? And I also, I think I felt like abandoned. I felt like I had all of these negative emotions, and I was not looking at this as an opportunity. I was looking at this as a burden, and I just had, yeah, all those negative emotions. We get on the call, and I think I was with you and with Felix, and you opened the call and you were just like, "Hey, I've been around a lot of this. Do me a favor. Let's put your emotions to the side and spell out like the facts of the situation. I need to better understand what's going on here." I was like, "Okay, I can do this." So I kind of lay out the facts of all of the everything that's happened, kind of the state of the agency, what his offer was. And, I was kind of like defeated. I'm just like, I don't even know what to do. I don't know what to do. Someone said I should talk with you. And the first thing out of your mouth was like, this is a huge opportunity. This is so exciting. You were just like, this is amazing. And I was just, it was the first time that someone had said that to me where I was just like, wait, is it?" I was like, is this great? And I was like, and then you were basically like making your case, right? You were explaining how I'd likely be able to make this transaction happen in my favor, that I had a lot of options to consider, that I had a lot of leverage, that I was like in a position of strength, that
Yeah.
I could really dictate, how I wanted this to, pan out for myself. And for whatever reason, I could not get there on my own. So when you just like opened up that door for me, I was just kind of like, maybe this is good and maybe this is exciting. So that after that conversation, my mindset totally flipped. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I need to figure out if I can make this be like a really good thing for me.
And you did. And you really did. I remember watching it wash over you. And it was such an aggressive juxtaposition, to where you're a victim of this business partner who had good reason to hate, to someone who, from an investor's perspective, could get a significant return. And opportunities like this do happen, do happen, but not this easily. So you're well positioned to take advantage of it. There was a
Yeah.
few things that I wanted to dovetail on this, which is your own courage and your own openness to hear outside commentary. Sometimes when you're in it and you're in the mess, it's easy to put on the headphones and just kind of pity party your way to, I'm not going to do anything about this, or let it just continue to make you the victim. You're the one who changed your mindset. You're the one who said, this makes sense to me and I'm not going to allow what got me here to get me to where I want to go next. So I vividly remember the conversation. And then I said, "You have so many options in front of you, Megan. It's bananas, absolutely bananas." Uh, and secretly, I was like, if she doesn't want, I'll buy it. Like, it was that good of a deal relative to what the challenge before the organization and before you were. So I introduced you to some options. I said, okay, well,
Mhm.
You could so go buy this business by yourself. Here's how. Spend some time. I gave you some introduction to ways to facilitate that. And then I'm like, also, you could talk to investors. You could talk to some people who might want to come in with you on this and de-risk you a little bit within the dynamic of this business venture. So you're not alone, because it is, running a business is a lonely journey. And sometimes it's nice to have people from the industry who've done it before and capital to support you in that. But I said, you have all these roads. So go talk to some people who are all in favor of a Megan world and see where it lands. So for the listener who can relate to the partnership dynamic, to this crescendo of tension that leads to selling or buying them out, double tap on what were some of the things that were really important for you to understand mentally to be the aggressor in this and not a victim.
So I think after our conversation, I was really thinking about it a lot more. And I'll kind of preface this with I've always lived my life with a like being pretty in tune with my intuition. And I had this like logic was telling me this whole situation is fucked up. Just get out of this situation. But my intuition was telling me, you're not done. Do not walk away. Push through the difficulty. And so when different people were telling me, like, just walk away, you don't need this bullshit in your life. You can do anything that you want. You can be successful in another venture. And I mean, I think that's true to a degree. But when I heard your advice to me, I basically was like, it validated this like inner knowing that I was having. And I was like, oh my God, there is this path forward. And it was you actually like reminded me of what I think my intuition was telling me of like, find a way, find a way. And you just gave me so much practical guidance where I was like, oh, there's this way, there's this way, there's this way. And then let me start to think about what's really important to me. And so a couple of things like you and even the potential new business partners I spoke to, they all kept telling me the same thing. You could do this on your own. You could do this on your own if you want to. And I said, I really want to do it with someone else for a couple of reasons. I was like, I do want to de risk the financial investment. I don't feel like I need to own 100% of the company. And I have a clear goal for what I want to do with this agency. I want to grow it via organic growth and acquisitions. And I want to eventually sell it, which was the plan from the beginning, right? Back in 2020. And I want someone that has experience and that can help me get that done, right? And so I started to clarify that. I started to also clarify like what really is important to me in terms of ownership percentage or decision making rights. What are all the things that I learned in my last business partnership that I need to be talking about upfront and get in writing, so there's no ambiguity in terms of how we're going to make decisions or govern, et cetera, relative to debt, hiring, all of that, all of those big topics. And so it was an important, you'd given me that advice as well of like, really think, what are your non-negotiables, right? Like, what are the things that really need to happen with this? And then the other piece of it was I wanted it to be like a clean break with Chris as well. I didn't want an extended earnout or seller note. I didn't want that dynamic to continue to be a big part of my life. Yeah. I knew I was ready to move on from that, but not Refine Labs as an agency. So that was a lot of like the mental processing that I was doing and trying to like get to the root of what was important to me.
Yeah. You had a few, I gave you some introductions. You took all those calls. You were fast. You talked to everybody like that week. Like within 5 days, you had all that.
I moved quickly in all aspects of life.
It was passive investors. It was passive plus, helping you challenge and address the go forward plan of the business. It was financial lenders who could potentially source capital for you to execute the deal. And yours just like, I'm gonna figure out the solution. We're getting this done, which led to me introducing you to Mark. And my initial intention, as I'm a board advisor to Mark, I helped him sell, Get Noticed, Get Found. I helped him establish the next phase of his life. But he had done the partner buyout thing before. Yeah. And I was just like, twice. Just from a pure, like, great, yeah, twice. Like, just from a pure, like, he'll completely relate. He'll give you an emotional connection. Mark's a wonderful human. You should meet Mark and seek advice. I also knew Mark was looking to invest some capital. So he's looking to be proactive and move forward. And so was many of the other introductions. Like, I knew you had so many options. It was so important for you to have full control over that and really make the best decision you felt now that your intuition was was properly supported by the mental headspace of a go forward plan. So talk a little bit about that, because this is your first acquisition. You've been a part of it, like you've seen M&A, you've been a part, but this is like you now. You're the one who's buying out the business partner. Talk about what was important to you in regards to that partner, deeper than just, their support or their capital supporting you. And then let's talk about like what the deal started to look like.
Yeah. So I think when I was reflecting back on where things were difficult or challenging in my partnership with Chris, I was trying to use that as like a kind of a compass of like, what are the most important things that I need to be evaluating? And the other thing that I recognized was, man, I'm going to move quick. This isn't like I'm going to meet this person and we can work together for a year and then decide to be business partners, right? I'm like, I'm going to be making this decision within like probably like 45 to 60 days of meeting these people. So I need to just like put my cards on the table and force them to put their cards on the table and have an honest discussion about what this is going to look like. And so I think there were a few things. One was values alignment. And the interesting thing is, I think I thought that I had vetted that with Chris. And I think that in the good times, we were values aligned. And then maybe in the bad times, we were not values aligned. So values alignment was huge. I think another one was I was more experienced than Chris. And what I realized was I want my next business partner to be someone that's more experienced than me. I want to be the student, not the teacher in my next business partnership, right? I want someone that has done the thing that I want to get done and can like help me get there, right? And that I can trust based on their experience. And I was really looking for someone with just a level of just like emotional maturation, like steadiness. There was just a lot of roller coasters and ups and downs in hindsight where I was just like, so much of that was unnecessary. And I was really looking for someone that would take more of a long view, kind of more steady, and also someone that essentially would be open to kind of the core structures of the deal terms. Like I wanted majority ownership percentage, even if it was 51%. Like there were certain things that I needed to have full control over in terms of day-to-day operations. Of course, there are things that we should both agree on, and I'm reasonable about those things, but someone had to be on board with what was important to me in that regard. And also with what the goal was. Like, what are we doing with this over the next 3-4 years? And are we both committed to making this happen? So
Yep.
those were really the key elements. And so when I was meeting Mark and some other folks, that's what I was trying to suss out and kind of validate. But I remember after my first conversation with Mark, I was like, oh, I really like that. Like, and you had told me, you were like, you're gonna love this guy. He's gonna love you. I was like, you guys are gonna get along great. You were right.
Mark will hop on a plane tomorrow. Like, be prepared.
He hopped on a plane like 2 weeks after our first call, and we spent the whole day together. We got lunch, we, like, went to his lawyer's office, and we, like, had all those hard conversations about what would we do in this situation or that situation. We got dinner. We ended up having him and his wife over to our house in the summer, took them out on our boat once the deal was closed. His wife, Beth, is wonderful as well.
Yeah, they're a package. You get Beth. Mark's nice, but you get Beth. Okay, so walk through now the deal. You had Chris saying, buy me out. Here's a price. Where was he getting that price from? Just to give everyone kind of that as like table stakes. And then the next bit would be, okay, what did you learn about your options to get him that price?
Yep. So he used the valuation that we got from the potential acquirer in Q4 of 2024, which, we all objectively thought was a low valuation, but he sort of says, hey, I'm going to use this valuation. This is my ownership stake. This is the price. I'm being very generous. Like this is a low valuation. So just give me all this money and then we're good. And that was his initial offer. And after I had spoken with you and I had thought about it, I went back to him and I was like, look, I am really clear on from like a personal risk or personal debt perspective, what my number is in terms of what I'm comfortable being on the hook for on a personal level. I actually did go back to him and say, I'll give you this much if you're willing to take it, because I can do this with me 100% without crossing my line in terms of my personal risk. He refused outright. No way, I would never, ever do that. Okay. If you want a higher price, I'm going to have to find another investor, right? To bring capital into this. He says, okay, go do that. So that's when I started having conversations. Obviously, the conversation actually, both with Mark and another investor, I ended up getting two term sheets. And the other investor came in a little bit lower than Mark, and Mark came in at a number where we could go back to Chris and say, look, we're going to give you this amount, and then we're going to relieve you of any obligation of the existing debt of the company. And that combined essentially was pretty close to what his initial asking price was. So we felt that was a fair counter, and also offered cash on close, which I don't think he'll ever like say this, but I feel like like we got, I think everyone in the deal got a great deal. I think everybody involved
Everybody in the
got a
deal got
great
it.
deal.
Yeah. So I want to put some context to the details you shared. So a few things. You were doing what's called a partner buyout. And so you do have access to the SBA program. So you
Mhm.
can
I did
get
SBA
the
loan.
leverage buyout. And in a partner buyout, the lenders want you to give a significant amount of that as cash on close. So your partner's gone. And so it gives Chris what he wants.
Mhm.
You're also getting more favorable debt terms than you had on the original debt that Chris had brought in, was still carrying over in the business.
We got an amazing interest rate on our SBA loan.
Yep. And then the equity check that was required is you have a few options. In partner buyouts, a lot of your initial equity check is your ownership. And then you're looking at an investor to invest into that equity. And then both, what the SBA requires is personal guarantees by those who have a significant percentage of the business on that debt. And there are certain requirements on that with like house, insurance. There's a bunch of things you have to layer on top of that. So this was your first SBA buyout experience.
Yes.
You had set up the table properly. You had these term sheets. You moved forward with Mark and said, Mark, you can accomplish what I want to accomplish. That was that 1549 position.
Yep.
It was an agreement on the governance of the company that you both were aligned with.
Yep.
And then it was terms, because we discussed this. I said, you can buy this cheaper with less debt, but you would have to pay Chris out over a period of time. And you were like, hell no. I am more than happy with these terms and giving him money on close to say, see you later, and have no association or obligation to him moving forward. And so you had to get essentially a bunch of agreements in place. You had to get an agreement with Mark in place, and you had to get an agreement with Chris in place as individuals who are be buying this equity from him and using the outside lender. So what did you learn from that experience? Because that was a lot of new things thrown at you in a short amount of time.
Oh, it was heavy. We basically had to do the purchase agreement negotiation, like me and Mark with Chris. And then we had to go through the whole SBA loan process, which was really intense and tedious. And then Mark and I essentially had to establish our new business partnership, right? And we had to put our own operating agreement in place, and, a few other various agreements based on what we had discussed was needed and what was important to both of us. And it was heavy in legal fees. And so this was like, February is when Chris gives me the buy me out call. I meet you in February. I meet Mark like late February. We meet in person in March. I meet the other potential investor in March as well. I make a decision. I think we did LOI in April, and the deal didn't close until mid-July. So like April, May, June, July, I basically had like two jobs. I was like doing all of the work for the purchase agreement negotiation, me and Mark's operating agreement, all jumping through all of the hoops that the SBA puts out that you have to jump through. So it was, a huge learning process. And then it was difficult. Like, Chris tried to kill the deal multiple times. All of these different random things came up related to taxes or corporate structure. Like it was just, and Mark kept telling me, like, it's not usually this complicated. It's not usually this complicated or this hard. But I felt like we had like a little bit of everything in this deal.
You gained a lot of experience very quickly.
Yeah, we did it
And
though. We got
a
through
lot of
it.
advantages you had is you were the CEO, the primary person driving the business. And although it's very common for a negotiation to get to some point of penciled down, someone's threatening to walk away, ultimately the weight and the energy is in the person who drives business performance. And so the advantage you had, and we talked about it a few times, which was you just have all the ultimate leverage. And it's important not to abuse that, but to use it and to confidently use it to get to the outcome that all parties are trying to get to. You had a very fair and pragmatic way that you wanted to address risk. You're bringing an outside investor who did not have a pre-existing relationship with Chris, who did not know you as well. And so there were some things that needed to be addressed or some things that needed to be built into the deal that protected that person's investment and go forward liabilities, and all things that the opposing counsel tries to, everyone does. Like, this is the way they're not going to pay you. This is the way they're trying to screw you. This is the way that they're trying to take advantage of you. And then they start from there and try to work to the middle. And it's so hard. And you had so much responsibility, Megan. There was so much being asked of you. And yet you still delivered so quickly everything that was asked. It was truly impressive to watch your ability to manage all of these spinning plates, all of these deadlines, and show up for your team, show up for your clients, and still post online and do social media. Like, Megan, you absolutely amazing work.
That was the hardest thing because I think it's a really weird mental state that you're in because and you and I had this conversation. You were like, you need to like mentally prepare yourself to actually walk away. Like the deal may or may not happen, right? And you were like, it's probably going to happen. You can make this happen. But like, I was like mentally preparing myself to walk away
Yeah.
while I was trying to like remain steadfast and like doing what needed to happen to get the deal done.
Yeah.
And then you're like running this agency and I'm just like, I have to continue to give it my all like I've always have even if this just like all falls apart within like
Tomorrow.
30 days or something. So just the mental gymnastics was just that was what I'm like a productivity machine. I can get a million things done all of the time. But the weight of that like emotional and mental labor to like
Yeah.
be okay no matter what happened and give it my all and all of these it was exhausting. It was exhausting. Last year was a tough year for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, from 21 to now, I mean, it's transformational. The opportunities presented to you to expand your capability and give you confidence in what you can create. Like, it's hard, but I mean, at the end of the day, you have the strong enough mindset, shoulders, and resilience. And the people who do get better, get amazingly better. And what's really important for the listener to have as context is the business that she was buying, she could have flipped. She could have flipped. The valuation that they had was a normal kind of partner buyout off of some previous lowball offers. Megan had a lot more options available to her other than just driving forward with the Refined Labs vision. And yet you were going to do that. You were still ready to work and create value and have impact and face even more uncertainty, but with the driver's seat in hand. So it just speaks so highly of you. I talk about you as much as I can when situations are similar because it's available to a lot of people. And sadly, there's not enough. Transparency is probably the wrong word. It's so hard to be vulnerable to talk about that time where you have a business partner and it was hard and you got to a certain outcome. And thankfully, you got to a good outcome.
Yep. And I mean, it's like night and day. Like as hired a salesperson. I've made a whole list of changes that I knew needed to happen in the agency that I felt handcuffed, like I wasn't able to do before because of dynamics that we've talked about. I have this like 3-year vivid vision that I've written out that I'm like super energized by. We're getting our whole company together next week in LA and we're going to present it. I'm super transparent with the whole company. Like they know we're going to make acquisitions. They know we're going to try to sell this agency in 3 to 4 years. Like everybody knows the plan and everyone's excited to be a part of it. And so I have this like going through that. What I will say is when me and Mark talked about what our like 3-year plan was, I'm just like, yeah, we can definitely do this. This is like 150% achievable. And so I do have like a different level of confidence than I had before because of the experience that I had. And I think it's such a weird time in the agency landscape as well. Like there's a lot of agency owners that just want to check out and move on. And I'm like, cool. Like, this is another situation, like different from 2020, 2021. But I'm like, I see the moves that the market is making, right? It's going to be agency consolidation. There's going to be a few winners. There's some things that we need to do strategically to remain competitive in the AI era that we're already working on. I just see it all coming together. And so I feel empowered and confident in a way that I haven't since I've gotten involved. And so it's been a rough, it's been a rough like 3 to 4 years, but I'm actually feeling like really excited, really positive. I feel like a weight's been lifted off my shoulders. I feel like I did the hard stuff and now I can do, not that it isn't going to be hard, but that I don't know. I'm just feeling really optimistic about the future, and it's a nice place to be.
Yeah, wonderful. There's 5 tiers of response to turbulent times. Tier 1 is strengthening and growing, which you've done. It's saving jobs, it's positioning the company to leverage its best opportunities in the marketplace. Tier 2 are strategic reductions, all the way down to critical reductions, restructuring, value delivery models, changing the business, or going out of business. And you experienced kind of a version of all of those tiers
Yes.
since joining Refined Labs. And spoiler alert for a future episode, you're actively working on deals. You have great opportunities to add
They're
component
coming
parts.
inbound. We're getting acquisition opportunities that are coming inbound to us. I'm just like, "Mark, I'm making your job easy." Like, "We got this."
Yeah, like the path ahead for Refined Labs is plentiful and exciting. The last thing I would love to kind of bookend this conversation with, Megan, is you've talked to founders. They've confided in you, and there's kind of, as your stories become out and people become familiar with the partnership story, what's some of the things you would say to that business partner, minority partner who does a lot in the business, who's feeling a little bit like you felt in this process? What advice would you have for them?
So, I think one of the things that I always look back on, like, "Oh, if I look back, would I do anything differently?" I think it's really important for everyone to get really clear on what's really important to them and make that super clear at the beginning and not be afraid to advocate for yourself. I think there were multiple opportunities where, and you mentioned, like, I definitely had a victim mindset for a long time, but if I'm honest with myself and look back on certain things, it's like, well, I could have demanded or advocated in a different way for myself, and I didn't, right? And whose fault is that? It's not Chris's, it's my fault, right? So I think know what you want and advocate for yourself. A lot of people don't take the time to think about what they actually want, and then they get caught up in a situation. And then a lot of people, especially women, don't advocate for themselves well. It's something I'm still practicing and learning. And then I think the other thing is, like, I also believe that I could have moved this situation forward if I was more adamant when things were just like not good enough for me anymore. Like, I let a really difficult situation just kind of keep going for probably longer than it should have. And again, it goes back to my own agency. I felt like I had no choice. I have no choice. It's like, you did have a choice. And I probably could have forced a change sooner. I even think if he looked back on the same situation, he would acknowledge that a a buyout like this probably should have happened a year before it did. And so I think just get clear on what you want, go after it, advocate for yourself, and, like, have agency. You always have a choice. You never don't have a choice. I think that was a huge takeaway for me, and I don't think I'm ever going to be I don't think I'm ever going to wear that mindset, that victim mindset, ever again in my life.
And I would add one bit, which is if you're listening to this and feel that way, reach out to a Megan. Reach out to someone who you know has experienced something similar so they can give you some advice. The advantage you had, and I give you so much credit for it, is you listened. You could have just said, Peter doesn't know my situation. His advice, I can't do that. But the fact that you showed up open to hearing input from people who have experienced it before and have different levels of perspective to add to your situation, that willingness was one of the main things I've seen in your personality. And so if you're listening to this and you're in a similar position, you got to reach out and talk to people. You got to be a part of groups where this is not some unique thing that just you're going through. There's plenty of people who have experienced it and know how you can get out of it or how you can take advantage of the opportunity. And on that, Megan, you have taken advantage of the opportunity. And I'm so excited to continue to watch Refine Labs thrive. If someone listens to this and go, I know Refine Labs, I'd love to be acquired by Refine Labs, or I just love Megan's story, how do they reach out to you? How do they get on your radar?
I only am on LinkedIn. I've never had any other social media accounts. And so you can find me there. I talk a lot about B2B marketing and our brand demand expand framework. And you can DM me. I'm always happy to have conversations. On there, you can get links to our YouTube channel, our podcast, all sorts of great resources as well. And yeah, this was a great conversation, Peter. Thank you for having me. And thank you for being my turning point in my story. You were a big catalyst in totally flipping the script in my mind. So I'll always remember you for that.
I appreciate you. Thank you, Megan.
If you like this episode, probably like one of our other episodes. Click here.